Welcome. You may be surprised to see us. We're back from a hiatus. It's Bruce, it's Andy, it's a Tachiai podcast, and it's time to talk about the Natsu Basho. First of all, yes, it has been 6 months since the last time we did a podcast. I'll claim some responsibility for that. Working at a startup can sometimes put you at a huge disadvantage for time, but we've managed to find a gap now, and we're ready. We're ready to talk about the upcoming tournament that starts, I don't know, almost a week from this exact moment. We'll be watching the lower division guys slug it out. Say hello, Andy.
Hey, Bruce.
It's great to be back on Tachiai podcast with you.
Yeah.
So we're going to do two segments this time. I think the first one's going to be Sumo News. We'll do a second segment a bit later, previewing the Basho with our regrettable predictions. But let's dive into Sumo News, and I'm going to depart a little bit from the schedule that I gave you, Andy, because there's one thing that came up that I still want to put on the blog that I think's absolutely huge news. Most people probably could care less, but to me it's a big deal, and that is Kisuna Sato's wife.
Yeah,
he's married now,
yeah.
Right? This was always the big discussion with us when we knew that he was going to be an Oyakata. Is like, where is he going to find the Okami-san? Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out that a highly successful Yokozuna has no problem attracting a lovely lady to be his wife, and he has an Okami-san. It came out in the last week. I don't know, Andy. Were you surprised that he was able to find someone?
No, I'm a bit surprised at the timing, I guess, and then also with I guess the recent news that Shimonomi had gotten married to, I think, the wife of the Itsutsu Kabu owner, because that was I guess the daughter of the current Kabu holder. She was single, and there was always a little bit of I guess
the Kabu was part of the dowry, wasn't it?
Yeah, and so I'd always kind of thought that maybe Kisuna Sato was in the running for the Itsutsu, but no, Nishonoseki. I mean, that's the titular head of the
Ichimon.
Nishonoseki. Yeah, and I think that eventually we might actually see who she is, but congratulations, and I think it will be great to have her obviously around and ushering in a much bigger stable than what he had when the two of them met.
Oh my goodness. So the Palace of Kisuna Sato is taking shape, and we're probably going to have to do a segment on it at some point in the future when we can either get to Japan to inspect it firsthand, or there's more that's been published about it. But let's dive into the happenings at Osaka. First of all, Wakataka Kagi takes the Yusho. This kind of surprised me, Andy. I mean, I know he's a sharp up and coming guy, but this was his first double-digit performance since a year ago at Osaka 2021.
It was a very exciting win.
It was.
I do think that I owe being tipped off about Wakataka Kage by you and Josh probably a little bit more than a year ago, because I remember us, like, kind of, well, not just us, but a lot in the sumo world, stumbling over his name like a year or so.
Well, it's great to listen to Raja Pradhan trying to rattle that thing off. And, if you listen to the NHK Japanese side comment, they fumble with it from time to time as well. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, I guess, just kind of like a rapid fire.
It's like a typewriter.
Yeah, and I can never get it right. But I think one of the exciting thing, early this year, I had been looking at the career paths of Yokozuna and Ozeki. And one of the things that struck me was that if you look at wrestlers who, I guess, were the next generation, guys who had fewer than, I was limiting my search to guys who had fewer than 50 tournaments, 50 basho. And if you think about Ichinojo is right there at 50 tournaments. He had one of the fastest rises
That's right.
to Sanyaku. He hit Sanyaku after 25 tournaments. There are 6 active wrestlers in that group who had rise that quick. One of them, Ichinojo, I mean, his was lightning fast, but
Yep.
he never. And now he's back. But you look at the other 4 are Asanoyama. Well, the other 5, 4 of them are Asanoyama, Takakesho, Shodai, Mitakeumi, and you're gonna love number 5.
Who's number 5?
Hokuto Fuji. Hokuto Fuji
That's
just
right.
pips Wakataka Kage. He made it to Sanyaku after 23 tournaments.
So Hokuto Fuji, I see. I remember that version of Hokuto Fuji before he suffered a concussion, and just in my book, he's never been the same since. And it's a little heartbreaking, but I mean, the guy can still whip on some really exciting sumo. But so, do you think that this is for Wakataka Kage? This is a glimpse of what he's destined to be, or was this just him having a good tournament?
I I think that he definitely has the capability of going further, but you touched on well there with Hokuto Fuji's injury. There's a list of other guys who are beyond that 50 basho cutoff who had a very quick rise. Aoyama, Myogiryu, Jokoryu, Chio Tairyu, they rose up very quickly, and they've not been able to, I guess,
Sustained,
maintain.
yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, obviously, it's not written in the cards or anything at this point, but and there's obviously 3 different ways that you can go. You can either hit that ceiling and I mean with a thud and get knocked back down, or he could go on to be Ozeki, or he could even go further.
So
He's
yeah,
also
there's rumblings now about him on an Ozeki run, and I kind of look at that with a bit of a wistful eye. His prior tournaments are 9-6, 8-7, 9-6, and 5-10. I'm going to guess a Kyokai unless he pulls another Yusho out of the bag. Probably gonna make him do a couple of. He's probably gonna have to turn in a few more double digits to get the nod.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't foresee. Eh, I guess a 9
Nine
and
and
7.
six,
Yeah, 9 and 6 being.
not gonna
um,
cut it.
Yeah. Um, but uh, no, we'll see. And I'd just honestly like to see some. I don't know. Sustained lower Sanyaku wrestlers. I hope Abi can stay around for a little bit
Yeah.
longer. I mean, because I don't know. Up until now, Takanosho has been one of those that will kind of yo-yo in and out of
Yep.
Sanyaku, and I'm just hopeful that some of these guys will stick around for a little bit longer.
So talking about guys breaking into the second highest rank, it was the Shin Ozeki Mitakayumi who made a pretty big splash all up until the final few days. And I mean, if you take a look at what he's done, right? No, he was not contending on the final day for the cup, but damn, he came close, and he had taken the cup in the prior tournament. He's had now 3 consecutive double-digit finishes. Was his 8th consecutive Kachikoshi, for heaven's sakes.
Hmm.
And it's his second basho in a row where he was kind of strong-ish in week 2, which had always been his weakness, was the week 2 fade. Has he made a step change? Has he elevated his performance? Or are we looking at a dominant Mitakayumi going into the rest of the year?
He has, and I'm really hopeful that he will be contending more in the final weekend. Like you said, the week 2 slide has always been kind of his thing, unfortunately. but his reign is off to a great start, and he's the top Ozeki right now. I and it, it's hard to think of Shodai and Takakesho really
Oh, we're gonna get to Shodai.
pressuring him. So
We're gonna get to
yeah,
Shodai.
I think Mitakeyumi's um, he he's definitely, I don't know. Hopefully he's worked on that endurance and he'll be able to stick
I
around.
hope so too. But yeah, it's very interesting to see that he's kind of made us. I think he's made a step change. I think that as long as he can not pick up any additional significant injuries, we're probably going to see him being pretty strong Ozeki for a while. And there was news that came out on Twitter. Thank you, Harith, by the way, that he had lost 5 kilograms, which I think will benefit him greatly because he'd gotten his mass up a little high. I know that some of these guys try to keep the absolute maximum mass they can just to make themselves more difficult opponents. But, losing 5 kilos when you've got that much muscle mass in your body underneath, would make probably a significant difference in your speed and your agility. So could be a portend of good things to come.
I just really want to see him hit 14 wins.
That would be most impressive. He'd probably pick up his 4th Yusho. The man's already got 3 freaking Yushos, and he just made Ozeki. It's kind of interesting. And on the subject of Yushos, well, let's pivot from the highs to the lows. Yet another almost Yusho for Takayasu. This is his 6th. That was his 6th Jun Yusho. And he seems quite tragically to be following the course of his senpai, who is, of course, Kisuna Sato, who ran up an enormous string of Jun Yushos without lifting the cup until right there at the end of his career. So he had 4 months off, right? There was the COVID Kyujo. So he had 4 months off, and he came back pretty strong, but he kind of fell apart in the last 4 days. Andy, are we ever going to see anything big out of Takayasu again, or was that his last hurrah?
That might have been because it was not coming from a position in the Joy. He was
Meiji 7.
Yeah, and so he was not, I guess, paired off with the I guess the highest competition or the strongest competition. Yep. From the start. And so when you've got those lower rankers competing for the Yusho, it's, I guess, it's just telling you that nobody's dominant north of the, I guess, the lower Maegashira. And now that he's in the Joy, he's going to be in the meat grinder. And
yeah, he's Maegashira 1 East, so he's right there.
Yeah. It'll be difficult, especially if Terunofuji stays in this tournament, at least into week 2.
Yep. So he's that was his first Kachikoshi, believe it or not, since May of 2021. He had a string of losing records going into that tournament. So, doing research for this episode, I was kind of surprised that he had a string of bad scores. And to my eye, he lost 3 of his last 5. He looked really sloppy at the end. He'd sort of reverted to his wild man sumo, where he was off balance most of the time. He wasn't transmitting power to ground, and I'm not even sure he knew what he was doing half of the time. And that final match against Wakataka Kagi was a complete crapshoot. There was no way that he was fighting from a position of strength. He was just trying to win. That's just my opinion on that one.
Well, and you look at those last matches, and that's when he's hitting, when he's up against the Ozeki and the Sekiwake, and he's going to be facing them week 1 now, so it's going to be difficult.
So as long as we're sliding down, let's talk about Meise. Okay, what the hell happened to this guy? He is not a garbage Rikishi, but he finished 1-14. That is almost as rare as actually, I think it's more rare than a 14-1 finish. He won his first day against Takanosho and then proceeded to lose the following 14. He dropped from Maegashira 3 down to 13. And this is a guy who had spent the prior 4 tournaments in the named ranks. Andy, I hate the fact that during COVID we don't hear as much out of the stables and we don't hear as much of the scuttlebutt as we used to. What do we think happened to Meise?
I think he's a bit banged up more than we necessarily know. He's possibly nursing an injury that he'd sustained. I mean, this has actually been the first time he was in Sanyaku, like for that string of about 4 tournaments last year. It took him 59 tournaments in order to reach this level.
I love that you got the stats, man. Freaking machine.
Yeah, I'm hoping to dig even deeper into them. That's why I love the Sumo database. I love.
So you're the guy who keeps crashing the damn thing. Knock it off.
It's not me. I haven't been on there. I haven't been on there in a while, since last night. But no, I guess he'd had some Banzuke luck, because he had that 5 and 10.
Yeah.
And when he fell, he was still in joy, so he was going to get hit again, and that's why I'm thinking that this tournament, he's down in the rank and file. He's in the low rank and file. Yeah, I think he's going to start chewing up some people down there.
And hopefully he's bounced back from whatever injury was limiting his performance.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I can't end on that one. I want to end with a ray of sunshine, and that's talking about Kiribayama. So he's kind of an interesting performance during Osaka, because you had a couple of people really attracting all the attention, all the headlines. Takayasu, Wakataka Kage, Mitaka Yumi were all really just blazing a trail. But Kiribayama finished at 10 and 5, which is great. In addition, he beat both Mitaka Yumi and Wakataka Kage. He put them both in the dirt. But he did lose to both Legacy Ozeki, who had far worse scores. And so, this guy is a bit of a puzzle. He showed up at the joint practice and looked really strong against Hoshoryu and others. Is he just biding his time to become a big contender here, Andy?
I hope so, because and I've said it on Twitter, and he reminds me of Haruma Fuji.
Yes, he does. He reminds me of Haruma Fuji as well.
That
makes
especially
me happy.
Yeah, and so it would be nice to have him up there in the regulars in Sanyaku for a while, but it's like whenever he gets up there, he seems to have pretty off tournament.
I'll tell you what, we can't refer to Haruma Fuji yet, because this guy's really not even a mainstay in the named ranks. So let's refer to him as Shin Ama.
That's a good one. Yeah, yeah.
He can be Shin Ama for now.
Yeah,
finding his way northward.
Well, and he does have the Ama there at the end.
He does. You're right. Except it's a Yama, not a real Ama. It's a different. It's a different glyph. Okay, and with that illustrious and illuminating note, we're going to call an end to our first segment, which has been great fun. Andy, thank you. All of you folks who have listened this far, thank you. And please join us for the second segment, which will come up in a day or so later. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, listeners. And remember, for Sumo, it's Tachiai.